one of the topics, one of the questions that came up quite often as we were reading Quran and Woman was sort of the question of a heteronormative lens that may have been applied, and sort of a gender binary that is set up. And I know you spoke a little earlier on about sort of if you were writing the book now, you'd call it Islam and gender rather than Islam and woman. And I know that also right now you're working, as we said in our introduction for you, on sexual diversity and human dignity. So I wonder if you could sort of, you know, share with us some of your thoughts on gender and Islam that have developed since Quran and Woman. And I'm just going to bring in something that Atiya asked as well, which was really regarding the fact that Allah is often referred to as He, and she asked, is this idealized rubric not perpetuated by the use of He in Quranic translations, and that as long as we read Allah as He, it's difficult to shake off the shadow of the all-pervading male voice? So if you could talk to us a bit about sort of gender binaries and moving beyond those and how we refer to Allah.
Okay, so those are two different questions, and they're both really, really good. But again, given the hour, I might forget one when I start to answer the other. I'm going to go with the pronouns for Allah first, because actually it's a bit shorter. I use all three of the English pronouns, he, she, and it, with regard to Allah, because we have the three. If you speak Bahasa in Malaysia or Indonesia, they have what I call the Tawhidi language because they only have one. So when I start my class in March, I'm actually going to tell the students we're going to all use dia, because dia is used for he, she, they, everything. It's just like universalizing. And in fact, it is this relationship between those two languages, because then I'm going to put Arabic in the middle for a second. It's the relationship between those two languages that really captures what's happening when we use this as a reference point to Allah. And that is that it's just a pronoun. Instead, when the Arabic grammar uses in its generic form the masculine, people become very literal with it. So for example, the generic form of the word to be pregnant is in the masculine form, even though male persons beyond trans don't get pregnant. And it really helps to unpack it as a matter of grammar because of the implications that have fallen from it, and that is that Allah is actually male. I don't believe in a male God, and I don't believe in a female God, but instead I believe in the Jamal and the Jalal, the feminine and the masculine, and these are attributes. So for example, I during the pandemic, I started a Patreon page because I was afraid that it was only going to be conservative Islam online, so I did my own page. One of the things that I'm investigating is the divine feminine. So I'm going through the 99 names to talk about the feminine aspects of the divine names, because Allah already has the masculine and feminine, already has the Jalal and the Jamal. But we have given a biased amount of attention to the masculine, sometimes because of the way the Arabic works. So people will say to me, well, how can you say she when the Quran does not say hiya, which is the literal translation? And it's interesting because I always refer them to when the Quran says we with regard to Allah, that is the first person plural, nobody takes it literal. In other words, they interpret it away. And that to me means nobody is being literal except when it's convenient with regard to customary understanding. So I play around with the gender. I identify as the lady imam because it's an English construct using an Arabic word, and I use the base form of the word. So I don't use words like sheikha. I have a whole nother story that goes with that. I won't get distracted by it. And I don't even say imam. I don't feminize the Arabic word. I take the Arabic word in its base form, and then I gender identify by putting the lady in front of it. And it's political because it's always been political. Language is a powerful tool. It can make and break. And I want to remake an understanding of a law that is beyond gender, that a law is trans, a law transcends gender. However, I can't make a conversation without the marker used in grammar for some kind of pronoun. And that's why, I go through the whole spectrum of what I have available to me in English, which is the dominant language I speak in. And what was the other question? Remind me.
Of course. The other question was just asking you really about moving beyond sort of gender binaries that might be read into Quran and woman, and where you are now and where your work is taking you at the moment.
Okay, so the research for the Arcus Foundation was finished in 2018. It's at that time that I ended up migrating to Indonesia. What I'm doing now, I might as well go ahead and say, because I have the approval of the director, of the program that I'm with at the National Islamic University, to start hopefully a research center focused on queer Islamic theology. Queer Islamic theology is a fascinating trajectory of critical reconsideration of notions of humanity, because we are diverse, down to the most minute part of us. You don't find two things replicated in exact form, between humans, at all, even two twins, for example. We are diverse. And in fact, we are increasing in diversity with regard to some of the genetic manifestations that are happening, in our children. The idea that Islam is projected as being universal, and yet there is what's the word I want to say, a kind of popular notion that, you can't be gay and Muslim, for example, can't be queer in any shape or form, and Muslim, means that Islam really isn't universal. So I don't agree with that, and therefore I feel motivated to challenge that understanding, not only from the research that I've done, but for, from 15 to 20 years working intimately in queer Muslim context. The binary is another matter altogether, because while I identify as non-binary myself, and that's in my avatar, my Twitter account, I do so for a number of political and spiritual reasons. I understand now that we're stuck in a binary because we don't know how to understand the rubric of masculine and feminine as a dynamic relationship, because we take them, again, literally with regard to male and female. Everything feminine is not female, and everything male is not masculine. I switched it up on purpose because that's what happens. I use the word woman in the singular form to talk about Quran and woman because I didn't have the vocabulary yet, with regard to, gender. I don't have a vocabulary for this spectrum except a binary vocabulary. And so I will still fall into the habit of using it because it's there. And therefore, it requires me to talk about how this spectrum is a part of a dynamic interaction from the very beginning, where the creation is considered to be min zawjayn. So the two is a part of the divine design. The problem is that people look at the two in an exclusive heterosexual normativity as if, once again, it is literal, as opposed to the reason why I identify as there are many reasons, but amongst the reasons why I identify as non-binary is because I understand myself as a configuration of certain masculine aspects and attributes and certain feminine aspects and attributes. and they're in a relationship with each other. It's funny because my yang side, my masculine side, is the side where I experience the most. I have a chronic pain on my leg based on some like nerve damage in my spine. And, you know, I had an accident when the first time I lived in Indonesia, and I have a scar over my head, which is where I put my tattoo recently that stands for healing. So my masculine side has been beat up. And it's really interesting because in my intellectual and spiritual work, I have much more of a masculine persona because I'm wedded to certain abstract ideas, and I promote them with a certain kind of rigor. But I very much am femme identified, and I love little nuances, you know, the jewelry and, you know, whatever the heck it is. So there I am with this dynamic composition between these two parts. And when these two parts work in cooperation with each other, then I achieve a state of spiritual tawhid as well. So I have a unity within myself. And so everything flows together. I'm able to achieve certain things using that masculine energy, and I'm able to, you know, benefit from certain things using the feminine energy, and they're both alive. And I don't want to compromise. I don't want to be a man. That was one of the reasons why it was difficult for me to even understand it with regard to myself, because people will say, oh, the only reason why, you know, she, you know, wants to lead the prayer, as if I ever went any place to lead the prayer. I was always invited. It's because she wants to be a man. Like that's some kind of a goal to aspire towards. But actually, I am, like every person, a composition of a dynamic combination between the masculine and the feminine. And when we come to a greater acceptance of this, it will be much easier for people whose gender identities does not fit into our notion of masculine or our notion of feminine. It will be much easier for them to reconcile the reality of their own selves, because you cannot know Allah if you do not know yourself. Would you know Allah? You have to know yourself first. And understanding and accepting yourself with that full spectrum of nuance is enhanced when you sort of deconstruct the idea of a male God. Allah is not male, Allah is not female, Allah transcends gender. And we as humans make certain selections with regard to not only how we identify, but also how we present, and also to whom we are attracted. Now I only see that as a part of the spectrum of human diversity. I no longer see that as politicized in the ways in which, unfortunately, it still manages to be. And therefore, I have to engage in those politics, to be honest. But I have removed any doubt within myself that somehow there's some kind of a right person and then there's a wrong person based on sexualities. But it's a part of the growing experience, really. So a lot of my work earlier is trapped in a kind of not reconciled binary, which even in projecting the Tawhidic paradigm, I was hoping to be able to go beyond. But I see for more time and investment that it needs a bit more in order to be cohesive in terms of future trajectories.